All right, today we're jumping into the world of Malcolm Bradbury. You've got this novelist, this critic and academic whose seriously sharp, satirical take on modern life, well, it feels like he could be writing about today. It's that relevant.
You know, in a world that's always changing, always full of these big ideological battles, Bradbury didn't go for loud speeches or anything like that. Nope. His weapon for cutting through all the nonsense and pretension of society was way simpler. And you know what? Probably a lot more effective.
And this right here, this quote just nails it. It really gets to the core of what he was doing. See, he wasn't just cracking jokes. His humor was like a lens, a tool he used for this incredibly deep dive into our culture. That wit, it always had a point.
So yeah, that's really the big question for us today, isn't it? When he looked through that satirical lens of his, what exactly did he see? And maybe even more important, what can his observations tell us about the world we're living in right now? Okay, so before we dive headfirst into his books, we've got to understand the man himself. It's absolutely crucial. Why? Because Bradbury wasn't just some writer on the sidelines. He was a foundational piece of the very literary world he was so good at poking fun at. So this gives us a quick flyby of his life. Born in 1932, he quickly becomes this really important voice. But look, you got to pay attention to what happens in the 1970s. He co-founds this huge creative writing course. Now, this wasn't just some side project for him. It became a huge part of who he was, and it gave him this incredible insider's view that he used to just brilliant effect, especially when he published his masterpiece, The History Man, in 1975.
And that is such a key point. Think about it. By helping start one of the most famous writing programs on the planet, he was literally shaping the next generation of British writers. He wasn't just watching from the cheap seats, he was in the game, an observer and a player.
So you might be asking, how did being an insider actually change his writing? Well, let's look at his most famous book, The History Man. This is where Bradbury took everything he knew about university life and sharpened it into this scalpel of satire that basically defined his entire career.
And right at the heart of this whole thing is this guy, Howard Kirk. And let me tell you, he is no hero, not even close. He's actually the perfect character for Bradbury's critique, a totally self-serving sociologist who's just the embodiment of all the moral gray areas and, that fake radicalism of the time.
Now, this is what's so cool. What you're seeing here is a breakdown of his whole critique. For Bradbury, the university in the 70s wasn't this grand, noble place. No way. It was more like a theater of the absurd. He was going after the intellectual posturing, the shaky morals, and how personal politics and even sex got all tangled up with the search for knowledge. He saw the university as a miniature version of all society's biggest problems.
So the big takeaway here is that this wasn't just satire for the sake of a few laughs. Not at all. Underneath all that, the history man is asking this massive question that we're still asking today. What's education really for? And is it actually doing what it's supposed to do?
But Bradbury didn't just stick to the university campus. He pointed that satirical eye of his outwards, to the whole wide world, and specifically to that often hilarious but also often pretty painful clash of different cultures. And to explore this, he invented a whole country, this fictional place called Yugovia. It was just a brilliant move. It basically let him create this perfect little lab to see what happens when these deeply held and often clashing worldviews smash right into each other.
And this breakdown here just lays it all out. On one side, you've got Western ideas, bringing all their baggage, their prejudices, their assumptions, which in Bradbury's view just leads to these really shallow interactions. And the result of that, well, you see it on the other side. Big cultural clashes, huge misunderstandings. He was really calling out this idea that culture could become just another product, something you package up, sell, and consume, instead of something you actually try to understand.
But he wasn't just pointing fingers at other places. In one of his collections, he brought that exact same critical lens right back home, to Britain. He was digging into what globalization and this nonstop consumer culture were doing to the country's own identity, its own sense of who it was. So, okay, we've seen him take on the ridiculousness of academia and the friction between cultures. So, what's the lasting impact? What's his legacy? I mean, why are we still talking about Malcolm Bradbury today?
I think it really boils down to this incredible mix of skills he had. Yeah, the wit is sharp, for sure. But that wit is powered by just ridiculously sharp observations and a really deep grasp of how complicated modern life is. He took these powerful critiques and wrapped them up in stories that are so engaging, you just have to listen. And all of this brings us to one last really important question for right now. I mean, think about it.
We are drowning in a constant flood of hot takes and social media commentary. In all that noise, can the kind of sharp, thoughtful satire from a master like Bradbury still hold a mirror up to our world? And if it can, what do we see